So, hello everybody. My name is Kelsey Jaggard, and I'm the warehouse manager at YYC Growers and Distributors. I'm a settler in Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, Wesley Bearspaw, and Chiniki nations, as well as the Métis Nation of Region 3. And I'd just like to acknowledge these groups, as we would not be able to produce food on this land without their ongoing stewardship, and to recognize that this land is contended territory, and that we have a responsibility to show up for the land and for the people of the land, and to make sure that we're doing good work. So I'd invite you, as you go into this weekend, is to think about how you personally nurture your relationship with the land, whether it's through farming or gardening or just interacting with your other living beings around you. Just be conscious of that as you head into this weekend. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining our YYC Growers Education Series, which the main focus is helping Calgarians connect to their local food systems and the amazing people behind it. So if you've never heard of YYC Growers and Distributors, we're a farmer-owned cooperative that works to ensure that local food gets to Calgarians, and all of the food that we provide is grown within Southern Alberta. So we have a subscription box that you can sign up for on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and you get just beautiful produce that is grown from amazing farmers like Josh and Sarah. And if you want to learn more, you can go to yycgrowers.com. And I also have a discount code at the end of this. So if you stick around for the whole thing, I have a promo code if you want to sign up for your first box and join the movement. So today I'm joined by Josh and Sarah. So they're the new owners of Chef's Farmer and Grand Trunk Veggies. And how are you two doing today?
We're good. Got to sleep in a bit for this one.
So I try to make it a little bit later in the morning so you get your beauty rest. I hear you. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about urban farming in Calgary and what it's like to be new on the urban farming scene. So, Josh and Sarah, if you guys want to introduce yourselves, maybe we'll start with that.
Good. Well, I'm Sarah. I am not the main farmer of this operation. I have a hard time growing anything, but I do like eating and cooking with food, so it works out pretty well.
I'm Josh. I was formerly working for like the last 3.5 years as an engineer in training. I was doing basically like mechanical design, plumbing, HVAC, and then a lot of calculating of building energy consumption using energy modeling. So I don't know how that relates to this, but I kind of wanted to move on to a different path. I thought 3.5 years was sort of enough to get a taste of the office world, and now I'd like to try something else. So that's sort of why we're here.
That's awesome. It's actually pretty funny that most urban farmers that I've talked to have been like, yeah, I was in an office. I hated it. I just needed to connect to myself and back to the place that I want to live in and the life I want to have. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So how long have you been farming then? So if you just left your kind of office gig, I'm assuming it hasn't been super long?
Couple months?
Yeah, I've sort of left my job at the end of March. No, the end of February. And there wasn't really much farming in March, so it's only really been April that we've actually started doing some work on everything. But yeah.
So basically a month.
Yeah, and especially as an urban farmer in Calgary, it's very different if you're an urban farmer in California or something. How have you felt with like the seasonality of farming so far?
Just been way more focused on the weather. I mean, we know we always have crazy weather, but when you rely on it, I guess you focus on it a little bit more, and you kind of think it's crazy, even though we know what to expect here.
Mm-hmm. A Chinook rolls in.
Snow in June, I'm sure will happen, but we'll just have to be prepared for it and keep our eye on the long-term forecast. But so far, we've just been maybe surprised that things still grow in the cold weather. Spinach is growing great right now, and lots of people, when they're walking by the farm, comment on how early it is, but it's just something you have to know. Certain crops can grow well in the cold, and that's what we're taking advantage of.
Nice. So for those of you who don't know, Sarah and Josh bought Grand Trunk Veggies and Chef's Farmer from Kai Kosher, who has moved on to BC to continue his farming journey there. But I don't think most people know about Grand Trunk Veggies and Chef's Farmer. So I guess just a general question is, how many plots do you have around the city, and like where are they? Just kind of a bit of a...
Yeah, so we have 8 plots right now. One in my backyard that's kind of working. That's going to be number 9. Thanks, Sarah, for letting me take over the whole backyard so far. Yeah, so they're all basically up by the University of Calgary, sort of in that general vicinity within a few minutes. Yeah, so 8 plots. We've started. One of them is probably covers like a third of all the plots. It's incredibly large and daunting, but yeah, that's the one we've been focusing a lot on so far.
Mm-hmm. And so are these plots on land that you bought, or?
No, so, and this, luckily Kai had negotiated and found all these properties. That was one of the things that kind of drew us to purchasing the business, because that it's just a crazy, like, to find this many properties and so well laid out. So yeah, all the homeowners are sort of just go on it's a lease, but we don't really even have written agreements with people. It's just sort of like a handshake. You go ahead and garden on my property, and we pay them in veggies. Yeah, and then sometimes when we're watering a lot, which we haven't done a lot yet, we pay for some of the utilities as well.
So that's a pretty good trade-off. Veggies for
yeah.
Summer.
The landowners have been just amazing. They're super kind. You can tell that they enjoy it just as much as us. So I guess that's what you need to find if you're looking for somebody to garden or farm on their land.
Yeah, and I guess changing your own backyard into a gardening plot right now. Are there any challenges that have come up with that, or have you just been flying from the seat of your pants, or are you studying what the existing plots that you have and trying to mimic that in your backyard?
Actually, no, I'd say I'm sort of going my own way for our backyard. It's kind of a test one. I get to do what I want to do because it's not built yet. So definitely trying lots of stuff out, and I kind of like it more. Yeah. It's very straight, and although there are some weeds creeping in already, so I thought maybe I was going to get away from that, but no, I guess they're inevitable.
They are. You can't get rid of them. Yeah, so I guess a big question I have for you is, you bought an urban farm in YYC, and you have 9 plots now. What's the total acreage of those? Do you?
I think we're calling it a 5th acre. It's like 8,000, 9,000 square feet, something like that.
It's still a lot.
Yeah.
What to farm on? So what's been the most exciting part of the journey for you so far?
You have one?
I don't even know. I guess buying it was just kind of a crazy whirlwind experience. We talked ourselves out of it so many times before it was actually finalized, and then kind of just jumped right into it. Yeah, it's been really fun that way, and it's been such a huge experience so far. And we haven't even got into the summer yet, so it's been pretty great that way.
I think for me, it's just looking at pictures, it's only been a month, right? And looking back at where these places started and what they look like now in only a month. Especially my little spinach plots that you were mentioning, they're kind of quite enjoyable to look at. It's rewarding to see all the work that you put into. It has some progress and is going to eventually turn into something useful.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess the flip side of that question is, what's been the most challenging for you to buying an urban farm?
Want to go first?
Definitely buying it was a huge challenge. We talked ourselves out of it a million times. I guess finally signing the paper that we couldn't talk ourselves out of it anymore, but there's always still doubts, but we're happy with it. And I guess one thing is, I didn't really expect, we haven't grown anything to be able to sell it yet. So there's that challenge of sort of not having any income right now. Luckily, Sarah's still working. Yeah, so I couldn't really do it without her.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Sarah? Any big challenges on your end?
I think the biggest one right now is just my other work is still really, really busy. So kind of just trying to figure out how to manage both at once and help out Josh as much as I can while still doing my other job. So just been a little bit of an adjustment, but I think the more we get into it, the easier it'll get. But obviously, it's just a really huge learning curve to all of a sudden have a company. So it's interesting that way.
Yeah. And so a lot of positives, a lot of challenges. But what's the biggest thing that you've learned so far? And maybe what's the biggest thing you've learned about just growing right now in Calgary?
Well, I can say the biggest thing I've learned about growing or just this whole process is that it seems like I have to learn everything the hard way. I don't know if it's stubbornness or just lack of knowledge or impatience, but everything seems to really go the worst way possible, and then that's how I'll figure out to never do that again. And then I think that just maybe applies, and it's sort of why I wanted to come into this, just to sort of get us some, I don't know, some patience or like this better calmness. Yeah.
With office work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess to paint a picture for everybody, what is the processes that you're doing on the farm right now? So I think a lot of times we hear about there's urban farms around the city and then magically they're at farmers markets. But I know this, as you are learning, Josh and Sarah, there's a lot of steps between actually creating your own plot in your backyard and starting to urban farm to actually getting that produce out to a market. So right now on the farm, I know there's a couple practices that you guys are doing. So if someone was setting up a bed in their backyard to urban farm, what are some suggestions that you would hand out to them?
Well, there's the one thing about this is that there's a million different ways to go about it, right? That's why I kind of like it, because you find what works for you. What I've liked the most, it seems to be the simplest and cost effective, but you still have to be careful with it, is just throwing some cardboard on the ground. And that's sort of your weed suppression, and then you build up the soil on top of that. And there's lots of people out there who, some call it a lasagna bed, but this is a really simple lasagna bed. Because sometimes they throw like leaves and other organic matter on there, but I'm basically just doing cardboard on top of the grass, and that smothers it. And then you put a whole bunch of soil, compost, other materials that you want to, basically you call it a deep mulch, and that keeps your weed suppression down. But as I'm seeing, it doesn't stop them altogether. That's an ongoing process.
Yeah, and so because I know at a lot of your places there's like more like a raised bed type of
yeah, sometimes what happens is every year we add more and more material to the beds, and the walkways don't get any material added on them, so it starts looking like a raised bed, but in reality it's just one is compressed and one is where you're putting lots of material on top of it. So when we go to what I've found has been interesting, because Kai sort of left. I've never been to all these properties until I get there the first time, except for the ones we saw when we met with Kai. And each one's a totally different, different experience, or is a different state. Some of them been mulched over with straw. Some have the tarps on them. I found that's suppressed the weeds the best, but it's also sort of, there's all this water and leaves and sort of stuff getting kind of mushy on top of the plastic. So maybe that wasn't the nicest, but it definitely kept the weeds at bay. Yeah, so then you just go and sort of figure it out once you're there. The more you work on it, the more you get ideas, the more you start to see maybe what needs to be done and what the challenges are. Some have different weed issues. Really every property has different weeds, which is kind of interesting, just based on the different areas. And then you have to figure out what's your steps of turning this into a place that you can grow at. obviously it's not that Kai did all the work so that we know we can grow on it. It's just how do you do it so that you can grow on it the way you want to.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of compost are you putting into the soil? Like, do you have a favorite additive?
Well, we've so far we've done a bunch of this spent mushroom substrate, which is kind of nice. It looks like, I put a picture on our Instagram, it looks like a loaf of bread, basically. So this is a local mushroom grower. We went and took all their, we took all of their spent substrate, and it's really just like broken down material that has some like fungi in it. And then we also have ordered about 12 yards of this called King's Premium Garden Mix from Soil Kings. And so that's what we've been sort of mixing, a combination of those two, primarily the garden mix, which is loam and some aged compost and some other amendments. And that's pretty much it. We haven't added any fertilizers or anything. We won't be adding anything like that. Maybe some other more organic fertilizers, but I doubt it will really need it. Most of these things just grow in compost just fine.
Nice. And so when you are looking at your kind of plots right now, what do they look like? Are you still, like, some of them I know that you're still preparing, some of them you have stuff growing in, but are they still covered up, or do you have to uncover them a little bit before you start planting? How does that process work?
Well, we started on the biggest property very early, and actually every property that we're growing on right now is covered with it's Agrobon. It's a lightweight fabric, basically protects against hard frost. I don't really think the spinach needs it, but some of the other ones definitely, like the lettuces that we're growing, don't do too well if it gets to like -2 or something, the leaves. So when they're small, they're more adaptable. But yeah, all the plots right now are covered in this lightweight fabric. I sort of wish they weren't, because it's not the most beautiful thing in the world. You can't really showcase what you're growing underneath it. But yeah, once probably the end of May, getting into June, we won't need it anymore. It's mostly risk of frost, but it also protects against insects as well. So sometimes certain crops, they may just have the tarp on the whole time, or the fabric.
Yeah, you're putting hard work in. You want people to see all of your beautiful
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I also want to see it myself too.
Have to fold back the fabric and look at it.
Urban farming is a showy sport, everybody.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting out of this. So in the whole process, do you have any hilarious stories that have come out of buying an urban farm? I've always kind of been comparing it and joking with like the movie, like, so we bought a zoo. And just hilarious things that come out of that whole experience. So have you had any moments where you're just like, oh my goodness, that was hilarious?
There's been so many little things that have gone on where you just don't expect things to happen. Like our little lettuce seedlings, we were doing just trials. Josh was like, don't touch the plants because I tend to kill everything. But Josh was doing the trials, and the dog was out in the yard guarding them and then trying to eat them. Then wouldn't let us near them, and like it's a lettuce leaf, like you gotta chill. So that was pretty entertaining. And then we have a bunch of magpies in our backyard. So Josh went and planted our backyard, and the magpies went in and were like hopping all over the bed. So I was watching them. It was pretty entertaining. They were just having like time of their life, hopping through all this dirt. So it was entertaining.
Yeah, you're essentially just making a playground for all the critters, including your dog. So
yeah, dogs, squirrels, birds, they're all just running around the yard and enjoying everything. So it's good.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too that you're talking about, that cover too, Josh. I didn't get any beets out of my garden last year because my dad put so many birdhouses around the backyard that all the sparrows just ate all of the beet greens the entire summer. So yeah, I think having that cover is pretty important, especially in Calgary when, again, when we have seasonal produce, you also have all these birds who are relying on seasonal growth of plants to be able to feed themselves as well. So keeping an eye out for that is pretty important.
Yeah, I'll just see how that goes in our yard. I don't know. There's lots of birds in there.
Yeah, and you got a guy. What's your dog's name again?
Maggie.
Maggie. Well, at least she likes lettuce, very healthy dog.
It's weird.
As long as it's crunchy.
Yeah. If it's not crunchy, she just spits it out. But
There you go. Maybe your spinach is safe then.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So you are kind of getting into the local food scene in Calgary. So for you two, what is the role of like the local food system, and how much has the local food community played a role in your experience so far?
I think they've been amazing so far. We've had just such good interactions with the whole community, with YYC Growers and kind of everyone that's been involved in both YYC Growers and in the farm in the past with Kai. We've met with local markets and distributors and other growers, and everyone's just been so fantastic and so helpful, and just kind of willing to listen and help us out with different problems we might be having or suggest things. Like the mushroom substrate that Josh was talking about, we would never even have thought of that. But we were talking with Vicky from Basil Ranch, and she mentioned it, and within 2 days we had our whole yard was filled with these little loaves of bread looking things. So yeah, everyone's just been really wonderful to deal with that way, and just really supportive of kind of us stepping into this whole new market.
Yeah, I can sort of echo the same thing, even with the restaurant owners that I've met. A lot of them say, yeah, we like to order from, they said, the little guys, which would be us, yeah. But I mean, they just said they like to support local business, and that's awesome. They're sort of, some of these places have been sort of entrenched in Calgary, and it's nice that they still want to, aren't too big to look out for us, and sort of, everybody's been supportive, so yeah, hopefully we can support them as well.
Mm-hmm. And especially with growing seasonally in Calgary, how do you guys see seasonal growth being a big part of the local food system and like food sustainability and stuff like that?
Well, for sure, yeah, that's one thing that I'm sort of learning about, especially from Kai, is that certain crops have I don't know, they're in season, right? And that's when people want to eat them. I think he said, I don't know if it was kale or he said there was one that nobody even wants to look at after a few months anymore. And he said, like, if you have radishes early on in the season, yeah, that some people might be excited, but come midsummer, nobody's too excited about a radish anymore. So, yeah, and you got to grow what's in season as well. Spinach doesn't like the heat, so we grow it early on, and then in the later season. And so, yeah, you have to take the conditions that are available and grow what you can grow. And it seems like there's also, like with the restaurants, they like what's in season as well, because something that's in season tastes the best and has the best growth conditions. So it's a crop that everybody would like at that time, and you're getting it's in its best condition as well.
Mm-hmm. And especially as a farmer as well, growing stuff that is in season makes sure that you don't have to use this exponential amount of energy and water to make sure that it's growing, because it's just the natural time that it should be growing anyway, and the conditions it should be growing in. So as a farmer, I can see that being a lot of energy efficiency on your end, not having to put too much effort into I guess just like wasting a lot of resources towards something that doesn't want to be growing at this time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you said you were in restaurants. What restaurants can people find you in?
Well, I don't want to speak too soon.
Not at the moment.
Yeah.
Don't have anything to harvest yet. Hopefully in June.
And with all the way the restaurants are going.
Yeah.
There's we've been, the ones we've met with, the Allium, they're sort of a vegan restaurant. The chef is awesome there. And then we met with Donna Mac, the LT at Donna Mac. We'll see if they want to purchase our produce or not. Depends what we have and what they want. The restaurants are definitely more, I can't guarantee anybody's going to have any of our product. Just really, that's sort of a play it by ear kind of thing. Hopefully they will.
Well, I'll let everyone know that we're going to have your product at YYC Growers. Yeah, woo! Which is awesome, because I think being a company that is supporting local seasonal produce, it's awesome to be able to, again, support local growers who are growing with the season and who are making sure that their growing practices are environmentally friendly, like you said, like not actually tilling up your grass and laying down that cardboard and building up on top of that, still allows for that microbiome underneath the soil, underneath that grass to keep living, and you don't have to till anything up, right? So that's something that we find super important as a company at YYC Growers, and being able to support the good work that you guys are doing and your beautiful beds that one day we'll be able to see the sunlight. Josh. So I wanted to ask you one big last question. So I want you to think very big, but if you could create your dream farm, your dream urban farm, maybe let's go with that, what would it look like?
Well, we definitely have an idea for our dream rural farm.
Okay.
I can talk about urban too. It's sort of, I mean, urban or the rural one will just add a few more things on, a little bit more area to play. For the urban farm, I think it's really like we want everything to be beautiful. Basically, a lot of the stuff that I've learned has been through watching other farmers on YouTube. There's one called Never Sink Farm. The guy's name's Connor Crickmore, and he has a whole section that his wife gardens flowers, and they do cut flowers, and that's awesome. He says he likes having it there because it looks beautiful, and he likes being there. And when you're going to spend all your time there, I think that's something that's worthwhile for sure. There's another guy called Richard Perkins. He's in Sweden, and he is sort of a permaculture design. So I'd like to kind of follow some of his like science and how he uses his techniques in order to improve the soil health and improve ecosystem health, and sort of just use some earth hacks or science hacks to help your garden. And then I think we just want it to be really as simple as possible. You can make things really complex, but it doesn't need to be too complex. We want it to be something where you're not running around with your head cut off, even though that will happen sometimes. You'd like to have things aligned, have things laid out where you want them to be. And that's something that's going to be an ongoing process for sure. And then when it comes, if we were going to do our rural, we've talked about that. We would definitely sort of want to have like some crazy flower gardens. Maybe Sarah can look after those, and then
gotta learn how to grow first.
Maybe have a place where people can do events. That's really to come enjoy what all the work that you put in and see the nice land. I think we're still a long ways away from anything like that, but I think that would be in the long-term future.
Nice. And a lot of urban farmers I've talked to actually have kind of mentioned that they've become these like accidental activists. Do you feel that way at all right now about like local food systems and stuff like that?
I'm not sure if I'm an activist yet. I mean, you know, when you get into a certain job and you see everything as you see your job everywhere, right? Every time I see a garden with a nice, or a grass yard with a nice south-facing plot, I want to go knock on their door and tell them that they should be growing food there, but I just can't do that. So maybe in the future they'll come to us. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's a great idea to grow your own food, and I love seeing people that are doing that. And I notice more a lot when I'm walking down, taking our dog for a walk, who has gardens in their backyard, and I just think that's awesome when people have raised beds or whatever size garden that they can come up with. That it all helps really, and you know you're going to get the best produce. You know how you made it. You know that there's no funky things going into the growth of it, and yeah, that you're supporting just a really nice way of life.
Mm-hmm. And what's one of the things you're kind of most proud about with like your growing practices? I know they're just getting started, but
what's happening there?
Whoa, sorry, I'm just gonna mute.
What are we most proud of?
I think, well, for me, I think I'm most proud of just taking this gigantic leap into doing this, and trying to do it in more like a sustainable way that's going to support the ecosystem and support the soil health, and produce nutrient dense food that is obviously going to be better for everyone to eat, rather than having stuff that's shipped from good, like whoever, wherever things come from. I don't even know where food comes from anymore. So having stuff that's grown locally and grown sustainably is really important.
I think for me, it's just every time I see my little seedlings popping out of the ground, no matter what it is, that sort of kind of brings a smile to my face. I had some carrots pop up the other day, and I know they're a little bit more difficult to germinate. So I definitely was pretty happy about that.
Nice. I'm excited for your carrots. For the first time in a long time, I ate store-bought carrots yesterday, and I was a very sad person.
Yeah.
Just wanted my carrots that came from local producers back, but they've pretty much run out for the entire season. Which is another thing about eating seasonally too, is there is such like a short time span when it comes to growing things and being able to eat things. And if you don't have a big storage capacity, then you can't store carrots for the summer. So that is an ongoing challenge, but something that if I'd invite everybody to try to eat seasonally, and even just looking up what grows seasonally, even in Calgary right now. So at YYC Growers, we're still waiting for all of the spinach and lettuce from Josh and Sarah to come. But it's all sprouting right now. But in the meantime, a lot of us are relying on things that are grown in greenhouses right now, or that are aquaponic and hydroponic stuff when it comes to greens. So as there's a big influx of local farmers who are growing greens that are going to be coming up soon, it has to be harvested and it has to go to market right away. So if you are a subscriber with us, prepare to get the most amount of greens, probably for a couple months. But again, that's what we have to do to eat seasonally and support local farmers who are growing that. And that's what's in season at the time. So just making sure that that's there. I'm going to open up to
throw in some red lettuces as well, so it's not all green.
Nice. Yeah, you throw a little bit of color in there. Yeah. But I'm going to open it up to any questions. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask Josh and Sarah a question, or if you want to put something in the chat, feel free to do that.
Okay, yeah, this is Roxanne, and I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm one of the co-founders of Spin Farming, and I'm not sure if any of you have heard of that, but it's actually has quite a history with the YYC Growers, and Calgary was sort of a hotbed for spin farming a number of years ago with Marcus Reidner. I see Sarah, I think maybe on this session, and Kai actually, and Rod Olson. And what we're curious about here in Philadelphia is, first of all, congratulations for buying an urban farm. But the question that has popped up here when I've told people about this is, what did you buy? Exactly.
Well, that's a good question.
Well, I'll tell you. I sort of have an ulterior motive for asking it, because spin farming really emphasizes the business side of farming, because it's something that beginning farmers really have a hard time getting their head around. But the other thing is, it reduces the amount of land needed for starting up. And in fact, the model that you're following, that Kai has followed, Rod Olson, and a lot of other farmers in Calgary have followed, is what Wally Satchwich calls the multi-locational model. And like you, Josh, when he first started out like 20 years ago, he started out in his backyard, and he started looking around and seeing farms everywhere, in yards everywhere. And I think he was up to farming about 25 different plots, which, yeah, given maybe where you are now, it's kind of mind-boggling. But he worked out systems that made it actually pretty efficient. But the whole point was, you don't have to buy land to start out farming. So the question is, if you buy a farm, but you're not buying the land, what are you buying?
Well, I think I can sort of answer that. And to your point, there was probably, on when we were buying it from Kai, there was a line that just said Goodwill. And that's definitely part of what we bought. And I can say the reason we went this route is I'm not really the most outgoing person. So to be able to find 8 locations or so many locations that enough that you could actually make money on would have been a real challenge in the first year. And you wouldn't even, what we liked about this is that on day one, I can go hit the ground and go start putting seeds in the ground. And so that goodwill is actually kind of a goodwill of the landowners is sort of been a big piece of this. And once we've met them, they're all the most amazing people, really. And just that we have their support, and we may lose some in the future. It's possible, but just to give us that head start has been amazing. As well, we got a bunch of tools. We got all the tools we needed. We got we have access to a location where we have a walk-in cooler. It was just like a personal built walk-in cooler, but it works just fine. And we have a steamer and a drying area and all this stuff. So
well, I got to say, a cooler is a huge advantage for you. And I'm sure if you've talked to Kai or other farmers there, you know that it kind of evens out your workflow so that you aren't harvesting, right before market sometimes, and so it'll really reduce your stress level. So that's a huge advantage.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And then I think the other thing that we, with this purchase specifically of Kai's business, is included in it is his mentorship over the next year to 2 years. So that was pretty huge to have included within the purchase, so that we have someone to kind of mentor us through the whole process for the first year. Of what to do and how to do it, and kind of someone that we can troubleshoot with, because obviously we're brand new, so there's a lot of stuff that we would never know if it wasn't for him or for the other growers that we encounter.
Yeah, and I think when we actually had a meetup with Kai a year or two ago to talk about his operation, and he emphasized the relationships that he had built up with customers over the years, and I would assume that that's a huge advantage too, sort of building or buying a built-in sort of customer entree with YYC Growers, obviously, and the restaurants maybe that you mentioned. I mean, Josh being a shy guy, I mean, it's that whole thing you sort of already have entree to. So
well, of course, and of course, along with that came the access to YYC Growers, and so
which is huge.
Yeah, it would be remiss to note that we're also very happy to have them be able to purchase our stuff, and we want to work very closely with them. It's just that I haven't had any product to sell yet, so that's not on the on the top of my mind.
Well, one last comment I'll make, and then I'll turn it over to other people. But Kelsey mentioned or asked you what was your dream farm, and you said, well, actually it's a rural farm. And I'll just leave you with encouragement that, I mean, Marcus Reidner obviously started urban, and now he's got a fairly sizable farm. But there's another fellow in Edmonton. His name was Ryan Mason, and he started out as an urban farmer, and he now has 5 acres. He actually went back to the family farm, and we've actually heard a lot of stories. I guess you guys don't have a family farm to go back to, but urban farmers who kind of leave the farm, go to college, and whether, I don't know, consciousness is raised or whatever, but they get pulled back to their rural roots. And so with Ryan, he went back to his 5-acre farm, but he said every system that he worked out at his urban farm translated to his rural farm, and he could scale up much more effectively, much more confidently and successfully. So I just want you guys to know that whatever you're doing is going to be a huge foundation for wherever you end up, even if it's outside the city.
Well,
so anyway, good luck.
Thank you for the comments.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roxanne. And for those of you who are unsure about what spin farming is, so spin farming is a small space kind of intensive farming, just so a bit of terminology for people. But there's another question here for Josh and Sarah. So this one is, as a beginner Calgary gardener, what seeds/plants would you suggest starting with?
I think we say grow. I mean, obviously we're just a few weeks away from getting out of the frost uh, warnings of frost. We hope, but I mean, grow what you want to eat. Really, we love spinach, so I'm going to grow lots of spinach. That spinach is one you can still plant. Greens are fun. Radishes are one of the things that I started with last year that maybe like even I don't love radishes that much, but just the fact that I could pull out something that I could eat within, hey, it only took like 35 days or something, and this thing was already grown. That was a huge sense of accomplishment for not doing that much really, just putting some seeds in the ground. They were quite happy to grow all on their own, and they're the fastest, always one of the fastest ones to harvest. Greens are awesome. Tomatoes take more work and you wait a little bit for them, but yeah, really any greens right now are awesome to grow, and then pick things that you like. I think that's going to make you want to stay with it longer if you're able to pull it out of the garden and put it into something that you want to cook with.
Yeah, James agreed. He said seeing a radish sprout after 3 to 4 days is very satisfying.
Yeah.
Right, you're sitting there being like, why haven't you sprouted yet? What's going on? Did I mess up?
Yeah. So there's also a comment from Alexia in the chat here, and she is an urban planner, and said they've been thinking a lot about incentivizing urban farming in Calgary. So just a question for you two is, in your experience coming into the business, what are the barriers that exist to seeing more land around the city become farm land?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think there was some, because we had to do a lot of digging onto what the city allows and what they don't allow. I think they've done a good job so far in letting urban farms exist, as in I can go and work on other farms or on other properties, no problem. I think some things are coming better to being able to sell them. Like I can't sell them from somebody's house. That would make it a lot easier. But do you have anything?
I think it's just like a little bit of the information. You kind of have to go digging for it a little bit more. So if that was more accessible and a little bit clearer, especially with the licensing. Just with like, we know that we don't need certain business licenses as an urban farm, but then to sell, it gets a little bit confusing depending on where you're selling from and how you're selling, as to whether or not you need different licensing. So I think that would probably be the biggest confusing point that we've encountered, but everyone that we talked to at the city has been amazing and just really helpful and pointed us in the right direction immediately. So it takes a little bit of digging, but other than that, I think everything has been pretty reasonable. And I think it's just more like as people see more urban farming going on, it'll probably become more of a forefront item to people.
Maybe a little promotion as well wouldn't help. I don't know what that looks like, but I know there's a lot of like I was saying, all those properties that I've seen, and I'm sure nobody, like some backyards don't get used at all. They're just sitting there bare, and I think that's the reason that some of the landowners have allowed us to farm on them, because that was more just a hassle of mowing and taking care of them, when hey, why not let somebody else turn it into a productive plot of land? So if other people knew that was an option, even maybe they'd be more interested in not having to own the lawnmower anymore.
So some education in there.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing too. So again, to speak to kind of Roxanne's point of kind of coming into this business, is you also get to kind of get the benefits of having these movement makers. So we have Kai, we have Rod, and they all did this massive push in like 2012-ish around Calgary to get all of the city to start to recognize that there can be local food systems within the city, and that the legislation around the city has to be able to accommodate that. And I think the groundwork that those people have laid has been huge. A lot of them sat on little city council sections to make sure that their voices were heard. And I think that is a big part about it growing is making sure that it actually gets into municipal changes and is recognized. We do markets with the city of Calgary, and I'm amazed. Like they run all these markets, and they're very committed to supporting local food. So it's great to see a city support that. I haven't looked too much into how much more it can keep growing. Next thing would be chickens. I'm really into the backyard chickens, but Calgary's got to catch up on that, and beekeeping, but maybe one day. Yeah, does anyone else have any? Oh, there is one question from.
If I could just add on to that one more.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm thinking about long-term for the urban planning that just is in the back of my mind is sort of water consumption for these properties. We use more than your typical landowner, and if there was ever a time when water was limited in the city, which could happen for whatever reason, it would be nice to know that a farm, as in a rural area, would be able to use as much, but the urban area would be able to keep their crops healthy as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big thing with soil health as well, especially as you're an urban farmer, is focusing on soil health, because when you have healthy soil, it actually holds like 20,000 more gallons of water per acre. So that's something that is probably in the works with you guys too, is continually growing that soil. But Nick has a quick question. So are you planning on adding new plots this year, or just existing with the 9 that you have in your first season?
Well, the backyard is still work in progress. So, and then honestly, I don't think so. We need to really work out, turn the properties that we have into the most efficient that they can be, and the most productive that they can be. And then I think next year, we'll start, or even sort of at the end of this year, we'll start putting out some feelers and, seeing if anybody else, because there's always the risk that somebody says, actually, we'd like to take our garden back, and we've seen what you do and it's awesome, but we'd like to have this, and there's nothing we can do, and we'd be happy to, well, we'll be happy that they're going to take it on. But yeah, we just have to be cognizant that this is not our land. We don't have any leases. So we'll keep our eyes open and maybe find some closer to our location, because obviously we're growing in the Northwest and we're living in Acadia right now. So it's not too far, a little drive, but if we could find some close to our house, I'm sure I might keep on the weeding a little bit more thoroughly.
Yeah. And Sarah just mentioned with like the water stuff as well. The city allows you to water if you're growing your own food. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, for you guys do good. Awesome. Well, that's kind of, I think that's all the questions that everyone had. I just wanted to let everyone know on the call, I did promise you a promotion code. So if you want to grab a pen and a paper, it's just YYC education, all one word. Doesn't matter if it's in caps or anything. So that's YYC education. And that'll give you $10 off your first subscription box with us.
Are you going to send it to Roxanne in Philadelphia?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I will. We don't do home deliveries that far. I'm sorry. So for everyone who is interested in signing up, again, we're committed to supporting local farmers and farmers that are using good practices that don't have any like chemicals or pesticides on them, who are committed to soil health, and who are really integrated into the local food system and wanting to grow seasonal produce that is, again, like we were talking about, it's nutrient dense, it uses less energy, and it helps the economy. So it's pretty important if you want to just every time you eat food, just actually be putting money back into the economy and supporting the environment as well. So thanks, everyone. I just wanted to sign out and say thank you for showing up, and thanks to Sarah and Josh for sharing all of your knowledge and answering questions and just being great people. And I'm very excited to see your first round of produce come into the warehouse.
Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you for all the questions as well.
Yeah, and
awesome.
Thanks everyone for joining on. We really appreciate the support and the detailed questions.
Hope to see you at the farmers markets or wherever food is sold.
And we have we're hoping, again, when restrictions hopefully lighten up a bit, is doing some farm tours. So we might be seeing you in person sometime this summer, which would be awesome.
That'd be awesome.
Cool.
Give me a couple weeks notice so I can pull all the weeds out.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. And our next talk is actually going to be 2 Fridays from now, which I think is May 21st, if my math is correct. And that's actually going to be with Sarah and Marcus, and they're going to be talking about what it is to raise meat birds and their experience with different breeds and how they go about it in a kind of regenerative way when they're working out on their farm. So feel free to join me for that. Registration for that event just opened today. Same thing on Eventbrite, and you can look for it on Facebook and Instagram through YYC Growers. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys, and I will see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.